Department of Computer Science, and he got his PhD from the Iowa Institute of University. So please give him a round of applause and welcome.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Medhi Bagherzadeh. Last name is a little bit difficult, so you can forget about it. I am an assistant professor of computer science at Oakland University, and today I'm going to talk about big data and the questions that big data developers ask. This work that I'm going to present today, it has been published at ESEC-FSE 2019 conference, which is a software engineering conference. And it's been a collaborative work with my collaborator, Rafi Khadchaudhurian from City University of New York. Alrighty. Why do we care about big data? We all have heard the term, right? We all have heard the term, different interpretations of it, different ways that people talk about. Why do we care about it so much? Because big data is everywhere. From commerce to science to national security, there is a lot of data out there that needs to be processed. And for that, software engineers that are out there, some of you would go out there and get jobs as programmers or software engineers. You have to write big data code to process all of that data, come up with some understandings and conclusions and recommendations. One example of the use case of big data that might be very prominent, Amazon and Amazon recommendations. At some point in Amazon, they had to decide, do we need to add the recommendation feature to Amazon or not? Some people were saying, no, it's useless. Some people were saying, yes, it's very useful. So which one wins? You can't just sit there and argue, right? You have to come up with some valid reasoning and back up your argument. They decided that they are going to write a big data software to analyze the behaviors of a large population of Amazon users. There, they wrote a big data software, they analyzed the behavior, and they decided that this feature is a good feature. They added the feature, and it added 3% to Amazon revenue. And guess what is the Amazon revenue? Last time I checked, it was $820 billion. 3% of that, there we go. That's a lot of money, right? So this is one use case. If you go on Amazon, and let's say EcoDot, you pick this product. You add it to your shopping cart, and then you would see something like this. It gives you some recommendations of what other items you can buy that might be useful in conjunction with that EcoDot, or what other items people have bought. How does it do that? It analyzes your shopping cart. It has a lot of big data backing it up, and it gives you recommendations. And then you buy it, and Amazon makes money. All right. Who wrote this software? Software engineers of Amazon, people like you that graduated and work for Amazon. So yes, we can make a lot of money. We can make decisions by processing a lot of data. Big data is good and fancy and hot topic. But big data programming is challenging. It is not easy. A lot of programmers have problems writing big data code. So what do we do? How do we help them? To make big data programming a little bit easier, a lot of advances should be made in different directions, including big data programming, big data testing, big data debugging, programming models, and maybe languages and frameworks. All of those can benefit from a deep understanding of this. What are the interests of big data developers and what are their difficulties? If we can understand that, we would probably be able to help the developers a little bit more. This is not only useful for developers, but also researchers and educators. I'm going to show you examples of how you can use a little bit of knowledge that we have gained in this study to do some trade-offs when you are making decisions. Of course, this is just one factor and argument. All right. So to help developers, we need to understand what are their interests. What kind of topics do they ask questions about? And what are their difficulties? What topics are difficult for them to deal with, find answers for? For that, we go to Stack Overflow. Now you might ask, why is Stack Overflow? Because of this. There are 4 million participants, developers. There are 4 million developers that are participating to Stack Overflow. They have posted and answered about 40 million questions and answers. And people, other researchers, they have used this wealth of knowledge to study the interests and difficulties of developers for concurrent, web, mobile, secure programming. So if it has been done like that, we can use it for big data. 4 million developers, 40 million questions and answers. That's probably one of the best places to understand what is in the brain of a developer. What are they interested in and what are their difficulties? All right. Here's a sample question from Stack Overflow. And a Stack Overflow question looks like this, and it has different components. On top, you can see the title, and here is the body of the question. This question has 2 tags here at the bottom. These tags say Hadoop and MapReduce. What are the tags for? They basically help specify what the question is about. To find people that can answer this question may be a little bit easier. That's one of the use cases. This question, or all the questions on a Stack Overflow, they have views. This question has been viewed 78,000 times. To put that into perspective, the views for an average Stack Overflow question is, can anybody guess? Any guesses? 1,000, 1,200. 78,000 times. You would see other things here. Favorites and a score. So if somebody is reading this question and they like it, they can make it their favorite. So this number goes up. Score. On a Stack Overflow, developers can not only ask and answer questions, they can upvote questions, and they can downvote them, or it can make them favorites. That a score is basically the difference between upvotes and downvotes. All right? And this guy has asked the question. Now, this is a sample answer for this question. As you can see, 13 people or 13 answers have been provided for this question. And this one has been selected as accepted answer. So the asker that asked this question looks at all these answers and decides this is the best answer for me and marks it as accepted. So the concepts here that I want to draw your attention to is number of views, scores, favorites, tags, title, accepted answer. Okay? All right. To study the interests and difficulties of big data developers, we come up with 5 research questions. They are concerned about big data topics, the hierarchy of these topics, the popularity and difficulty of these topics, and their correlation. So what the first question is really asking is, can I take Stack Overflow questions and group the similar ones into topics? The second question asks this question that now that I have the topics, can I get the similar topics and group them into categories, subcategories, supercategories, and create a hierarchy? Third question, what topics are more popular? Which ones are less popular? Maybe what is the most popular big data topic? Which topic is more difficult? What topics are less difficult? And is there any relationship between difficulty and popularity of big data topics? So if I have the trajectory of one, can I predict the trajectory of the other? So these are 5 research questions that we are going to study in this presentation. Okay. To systematically, yes?
Are you going to talk about how you measure 3 and 4?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Then I'll wait.
So to systematically answer these questions, we have to come up with a framework and a methodology, right? This figure shows our methodology that has 9 steps. We start with downloading a Stack Overflow dataset. So there is this Stack Overflow data dump that is publicly available. And it's very big. It's probably 15, 16 gigabytes. So you have to wait a little bit if you want to download it. Don't be impatient. Then, after we have downloaded the data, we develop a set of big data tags to identify and extract big data questions. Because remember, there are probably 40, 50 million questions in Stack Overflow. Not all of them are related to big data. So how do we know which ones are related to big data? We develop this set of tags, which we call big data tag set. And then, using these big data tags, we go in and identify and extract big data questions and answers. We do some pre-processing on these questions and answers. For example, we remove A, D, is, are, the words that don't tell us a lot. We also reduce the words to their base so we can treat them the same. Like writes, writing, written, all of these are talking about the same thing. So if I want to treat them the same, I can reduce all of them to their base, and then now I can treat all of these 3, 4 words or all of his variations as one. Okay, after pre-processing, we model and label topics. What does this mean? This means we are grouping the similar questions into topics. And for that, we use this tool called Mallet. It's publicly available. After we have the topics, we group similar topics into subcategories and group similar subcategories into supercategories. Or sometimes I call them higher level and lower level categories. For each topic, we determine popularity, we determine difficulty, and at the end, we measure and study if there is any correlation between the difficulty and popularity. Any questions so far? Questions? Alrighty, let's continue. Okay, so the first step was after downloading, we develop a set of big data tags. How do we do it? Very easily. We start with a bunch of initial tags. And we expand those tags by adding other tags that are significantly relevant to those initial tags. So the sets gets bigger and bigger and at some point saturates. For our initial tags, we choose two tags, Hadoop and Apache Spark. So we take Hadoop, we compute tags over the entire Stack Overflow dataset that are significantly relevant to Hadoop. So it becomes this set. These are all the tags that are significantly relevant to the Hadoop. We take Apache Spark, we do the same. We expand it to this T-Spark. So now I have two sets, T-Hadoop and T-Spark. And the union of these two becomes the set of my big data sets, big data tags. Now you might wonder, why did we choose Hadoop and Apache Spark as the initial? Any thoughts on that?
They are the most popular tools to deal with big data.
Very good. These are probably the most popular and industry's standards for development of big data software. And they are ecosystems. They have a lot of frameworks and services inside them. Okay. Now let's look at the tags a little bit more carefully. As you can see, we see different type of tags in here that cover a large spectrum of topics. We have Hadoop and Spark-specific tags like Ambari, that's a service for cluster management, like Spark Streaming, that's for processing of the streaming data. So these are Hadoop and Spark-specific tags. But at the same time, we have general tags like big data here in red. So our tags cover a large spectrum of data. Our tag set covers a large spectrum of big data tags. Hadoop and Apache is specific and general. Okay. Now that we have our tags, we go and process the Stack Overflow, the entirety of it, all of it, to extract big data questions and answers. Now, what is a big data question? Any question that has one of these tags, we would consider as a big data question. For each big data question, we also include its accepted answer. We don't include all the answers. Why? Because we want to decrease the noise. Not all the answers are good. Only accepted answers are probably good because it has been chosen by the asker as the best answer. So we do that, and we end up with 157,000 questions and answers. 72% are questions, 28% are answers. This is a large-scale data set for this kind of study. 157,000 questions and answers. This is large scale. Most of the studies on the Stack Overflow, they do like top 250, top 1,000. Compared to that, 157,000 is very large. All right. So we have the tags, we have the questions. Now we have to group them into topics. How do we do that? We use topic modeling to group similar questions and answers into topics. For that, we use this tool, Mallet. Mallet analyzes these questions and answers and it spits out a bunch of words and says these are the topics. A bunch of words, they need a name. I need a name for that topic. So I have to go in and label those topics with names. Okay. Let's see how that process goes. For modeling, we tell Mallet, model our questions and answers into 30 big data topics. How did we come up with that number? How did we know there were 30? Well, we did about 40 experiments on hyperparameters of Mallet to configure it in a way that returns topics that are not too big such that they include subtopics, and also not combine the topics into larger topics and not create a lot of smaller topics that can be combined. So the size of the topics are right and they make sense. We did about 40 experiments on that. We ran Mallet for 40 times. We looked at the results. And Mallet spits out something like this. As you can see, these are the set of topics. An example, this. So what you see in this green oval is a topic. And these are the top 10 words for that topic. Can anybody guess what this topic is about? Looking at the keywords. Any ideas?
Spark.
Can you say it louder?
Data analysis in Spark.
Very close. Machine learning. How do we know? So to assign names here to these topics, we considered top 20 words for each topic. And on top of that, we looked at 15 random questions that belongs to each of these topics. And we picked a name that best describes these words and those 15 random questions and answers that we studied. We used open card sort, in which there is no topic name predefined. You just look at the answer, look at the words and look at the questions, and you come up with these names as you go and you refine. And two people did that. We had some disagreements, but we sat down and we resolved our disagreements, and we came up with these topic names. All right. Questions?
About the tagging selection, you mentioned you are using Hadoop and Spark, right?
Yes.
So have you thought to use big data directly to?
No, we didn't do that.
Label, right? One of the tag.
Yeah, we didn't do that, but look at this. When we did expansion, by adding significantly relevant tags, big data came up.
Yeah. So, because I understand why you are using these two tags, but I'm wondering whether there is any possible missing out.
Yes, that's one of the threats. Because we are going based on these tags, there might be always questions out there that we have missed.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I'm just thinking maybe using big data, which is a bigger category, and you can see have a bigger vision about.
Well, I think actually we did that, and we came up with less number of questions compared to this. So that's why we went with this. Other questions? That's a very good question. Thank you. Other questions?
So as humans, as you go through and look at it and come up with that, did you just look at these keywords itself, or did you go back and look at original questions as well?
Yeah, for each of these topics, we picked 15 questions randomly.
Okay.
We read all those questions and their answers and their comments. We also had this in mind, and then we came up with names that best matches up these keywords as well as those questions and answers that we have read.
Were the questions more useful than these, or was it a combination, or?
It was mostly a combination. This one gives you an idea, but sometimes the keywords give you the wrong idea. So you have to reevaluate that, okay, these keywords are used in the other context that I didn't think about when I started this right away. That's why, you look at two sets, tags, keywords, and the questions and answers. Other questions? Okay. going back to research question 1. What are the topics that big data developers ask questions about? These are the topics. We end up with, as you can see here, 28. Didn't I say 30 topics? Where are the other 2? So during the labeling, we figured out some topics are very similar. So we merged them. We merged 2 pairs of topics, and we ended up with 28. Now let's look at the set of topics. Some topics are very specific to big data. Stream processing, map-reduce model. But also there are some topics that are very general in red. Debugging, performance, and basic concepts. Any kind of programming that you do, you would probably deal with performance, you have to debug, and there are some basic concepts that you have questions about. All right. Topics can be best understood using their questions and answers, and as I said, we use questions and answers to come up with names. Here I'm showing you examples, an example of a question in map-reduce model. Here, the developer is asking, how do I chain multiple map-reduce jobs in Hadoop? What is map-reduce? It's a programming model for big data in which you basically break down your program into 2 functions, only 2, map and reduce. What does map do? Map takes your data and maps it to a bunch of key value pairs. What does reduce do? Reduce takes those key value pairs and groups those pairs by their key and reduces them to smaller sets. Now, this guy is saying, what if I have multiple map reduces, and how can I chain them together? He's asking this question because in the original Hadoop, chaining the map-reduce jobs was very difficult. And there is an answer for that, which was the answer that I showed you in the beginning. Here's another question. This is in basic concepts topic. Here the developer is asking what is the difference between Hadoop and NoSQL. Does anybody know what is the difference? All right. So Hadoop is an ecosystem with a lot of services to write big data code. NoSQL basically is for unstructured database and data management. So these 2 are not actually very related and comparable. But this guy has a very basic question, right? He doesn't know. All right. Any questions? Let's look at the topics again and see if we can make some interesting observations. The topics in green oval. String and text search. What does that tell us? It tells us probably that most big data is textual. Most big data programs that are out there work with text. They don't work on binaries. They don't work on images. They don't work on videos. They are mostly for text. So probably the next generation would be videos and images. To better understand the topics, we look at the number of the questions in each topic. Here, you see a diagram that shows the number of the questions, their percentages for each topic, and the average number of questions in each topic is 4,000. As you can see, a topic like map-reduce model has the most number of questions, and logging has the least number of questions. But look at this. Basic concepts. It has more than average number of questions. What does that tell us? It tells us that big data programmers not only have problem with programming big code, they have problems even with the basics of it. Do they need a lot of help? If they have problems with the basics, if they have a lot of questions about the basics, yes, they need a lot of help. In the paper, well, let's make another observation here. Look at the performance and debugging. You would see that there are twice as many questions about debugging as about performance. What does that tell us? It tells us maybe for big data programmers, correctness of the program is more important than performance. They have more problems, more questions about it. When I teach classes that involve coding, I get a lot of questions about performance. The students want to shave off microseconds and milliseconds. Well, when you go out, you will have bigger problems. The correctness of your programs, at least big data ones, become a little bit more important. Okay. Findings of our study, they coincidence with a lot of findings of previous work. Sometimes they corroborate them, sometimes they contradict them. This is the one that corroborates. So remember we said big data developers ask more than average questions about basic concepts. Turns out, Ahmad and Bagherzadeh, this is me and my student, we did a similar study on concurrency. And we found concurrency developers ask the most questions about basic concepts. Pinto et al., they did another study on 250 most popular concurrency questions. They say most of the concurrency questions are basic concepts. So this finding that we have about big data, that more than average number of questions is about basic concepts, it happens in other domains like concurrency too. Why is that? Maybe because most of this big data code is distributed and concurrent too. Maybe. All right. Research question 2 was about topic hierarchy. To construct the topic hierarchy, we group topics into lower level categories, and then we take the lower level categories and group the similar ones to higher level categories. And we repeat this. And we use open sort again. So there are no predefined categories here. We come up with them as we do the grouping. 2 people have done this, and at the end they have agreed on this hierarchy. This picture shows the hierarchy of big data topics. It expands outwards from the highest level categories to lower level categories, yet again lower level categories, and at the bottom or at the outermost are the topics that we just talked about. As you can see, all those 157,000 questions and answers, I can categorize them into 9 high-level topics. They range from programming to configuration, analysis, basic concepts, logging. All right. Let's look at one of these categories a little bit more carefully. Programming category. It has about 33% of all big data questions. 33% of big data questions are about programming. Programming itself is about programming models, programming languages, and data types. You never thought data types would be that important, right? But here they are, because they are complicated, distributed data types with a lot of nuances. Now, if you look at data type, you have data sets and primitive there. String, date and time. People have problem with date and time. when they are doing big data programs. All right. If you look at this, under programming, we have this model, MapReduce model. Programmers ask questions about MapReduce model. This is in line with the general understanding that MapReduce model is the dominant model for big data programming. There are other models, but they have never caught up. They stayed at the research level in the lab. Any questions? Yes.
So I just want to defend for the big data developer or programmer a little bit, because I feel like Stack Overflow is for all the population, for everyone.
Yes.
So you cannot say who asked the question or who answered the question, they are the developer, like this, that's for general public.
Yes.
Anyone can publish the question. So maybe I'm just like a learner. Even myself, I cannot call myself a big data developer because I don't think I'm qualified for that that label. So yeah, that's kind of my...
That's a very good concern, and actually we are doing an extension of this to see if we can kind of measure or come up with some measurement to talk about the experience of developers that have been asking these questions.
Yes, I think it's very, it needs a very specific definition for what's the
we consider whoever that posts a question here a developer. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think they know what's the basic knowledge.
Yeah, a lot of people don't post on Stack Overflow, but a lot of companies are moving their internal forums on Stack Overflow too. So you have that, and then you have the other side that some companies, they have figured out if they move their internal forums to the Stack Overflow, they get better answers faster. So there are very professional developers there too. And actually a lot of people that answer the questions are very professional. All right. Topic popularity. We use three metrics to measure popularity. Average views for questions in a topic, average favorites for questions in the topic, and average score. If I sort out the topics using these three metrics, it looks like this. As you can see, file management is the most popular. Logging among the least popular. All right, and I'm going to show you the use cases of this. Topic difficulty. To measure topic difficulty, we use these two metrics. Percentage of questions with no accepted answers in a topic, and the median time, average median time to receive an answer for a question. Let's see difficulty. Connection management, one of the most difficult. Data frame, which is one of the data types in there, the least difficult. All right. Correlations of popularity and difficulty. Remember, we had three measures for popularity, two measures for difficulty. So if we want to see the correlations, we need 6 correlations. We use Kendall correlations here because it's more stable in terms of the outliers in the data. We do the correlation analysis and we get this. The coefficient of the correlation and the p-value. As you can see, there is no correlation between any of these popularity metrics with any of these difficulty metrics. So I cannot say if a question is more difficult, it's going to be less popular. I cannot say that for big data questions, and vice versa. So I can't use any of these to predict the other one. Yes?
Did you check whether your different ways of measuring, say, difficulty correlate to each other? It's not clear to me that either one actually measures difficulty, for example.
So
the question is not interesting, or it's too easy, nobody answers it.
Can you keep the correlations up there? It's, I want to be able to.
So no, we didn't. So you're talking about like the correlations between these two?
Yeah, intra.
Yeah, we didn't do that. That's a good idea. We didn't do that. we have done this, there is some correlation between this in one of the other data sets. So the concurrency data set that we have, there is correlation between these three. For here, we haven't measured that one yet. But that's a good concern, yes. All right, implications. Our results are useful for practitioners, researchers, and educators. How and why? You can use these findings to trade off big data topics to make decisions, but this is only one factor. So let's see. Here, I am depicting top 10 big data topics, the circles. The size of the circle is the number of questions in the topic. And on y-axis, I have popularity that is measured using average views. And here I have difficulty that is measured using percentage of questions without accepted answers. From left to right, difficulty increases. From bottom to top, popularity increases. Okay? Now, if you are new to big data and you want to learn different topics in there, can you use something like this in your learning? So if I want to learn big data, maybe one factor in there would be something like this. I'm going to learn about data frame before I get into HBase. Why? Because that one is a little bit more easier to find answers to, and two, more popular. So maybe I know about things that are a little bit more popular, so I can get jobs easier. That's one decision factor. As a researcher, you are looking for a new area that you can make a lot of impact in. As a researcher, you would probably go with file management. Why? Because that one is more difficult, less popular compared to this dependency management. More difficult, less popular. If you can solve that problem, if you can make a contribution there, you would have a better chance of making a lasting, big contribution. As the teacher, yes?
Sorry, just a very quick question. You may have mentioned it, but the size of the circles.
The number of the questions in the topic. As the teacher, if I want to design a big data course, and I want to decide which topics I want to include and which one should I teach first or last, I would probably go not considering their dependencies. That's another factor, right? But imagine we have taken care of the dependency of the topics. I will probably go with this one first, RDDs, compared to the HBase. More popular, a little bit less difficult. So probably my students would have an easier time with this compared to that for the start. Other questions? Questions? Yes.
Just remind me, Kendall correlations, is that just using the ranks?
Yes.
Okay.
What else?
So I haven't seen in any of your categories anything related to privacy or security. Is that just absorbed by some of the other categories?
It's
or?
probably been so small that it hasn't even shown up. But yeah, there is not a lot of tools out there that do security or privacy for big data.
Okay.
So there is not a lot of tools. Programmers are not concerned about it. And remember, they are still stuck in the basic concepts.
Okay.
So you haven't seen that topic, see, that could be like, okay, this topic doesn't exist. So what happens to all these big data applications that threats to the validity? Of course, the tag selection process. As I said, there is no guarantee that these tags cover all the big data questions and answers. So there is some vulnerability there. We have used only one source, Stack Overflow. There is another vulnerability there. This vulnerability can be mitigated by the fact that there are a lot of questions in there from a lot of developers and participants. Manual labeling of topics. We manually looked at the keywords and the questions, random questions, and we labeled them. We might have introduced some errors in there. We did the best practices. 2 of us did that. We did it multiple times. We resolved our disagreements using discussions, and we came up with some unified understanding of the topics. Okay. So, in conclusion, in this work, we developed 46 big data tags. We identified using those tags 157,000 big data questions and answers. We modeled them into groups, those questions. We labeled them. Then we took those topics and we grouped them into a hierarchy. We investigated the correlation between popularity and difficulty. We studied the coincidences of our finding with the finding of previous work. Some we were able to corroborate, some we contradicted. And then we briefly discussed the implication for practice, research, and education of big data software. The moral of the story is big data is difficult. Programmers have difficulty even with the basics of it. So there is a lot of work needed there. Questions?
So of your methodology here, I didn't see anything that's specific to just big data. It seems like you could apply this methodology to any other domain, provided that you have enough questions on Stack Overflow or some comparable thing. Is that right?
Yeah, we did a similar thing with concurrency. Yeah. So the methodology is independent of big data concurrency.
So what are you more, a big data person or a person that likes to explore domain spaces, and where are the challenging problems and things like that? And where do you want to go with that?
So I'm mostly a software engineering programming language person. I have been working on concurrency, preventive software correctness for concurrent and event-based systems. There I have designed programming models and languages, modular and scalable, specification, verification, reasoning techniques, type systems, other analysis, to basically prevent programmers from making mistakes. So that they can build programs that are correct from the scratch, from the get-go, correct by construction. This is a component of that type of work to better understand what do developers really need out there. Are we sitting in the lab and designing these models and languages and type systems and all of that just because they are interesting, or are they really solving problems? We are doing another similar study for actors. And then that actually feeds into a more formal actor work that I am doing to prevent problems in actors. So we don't let programmers even make mistakes. That's one aspect. The other aspect that I have been shifting to a little bit is detective software correctness. So you basically let programmers make their mistakes, but help them find it and fix it, because sometimes they don't like the restrictions that you put on them to make programs that are correct by construction. Other questions? Yes.
So just a teeny tiny suggestion, maybe
Sure.
you can consider about. Like you are using Stack Overflow right now, and I'm thinking about Reddit, which is another platform maybe you can consider about. Because the part that I like Reddit a lot is like all the discussion is like happening in one community, so you need to join this community first. So I believe there are some other general public in the community, but I believe most of them are more professional programmers.
That's a very good suggestion. And actually, as another source, we have also been looking in the study that we are doing we are doing a Stack Overflow on GitHub. So
Yeah, a little bit similar.
then you would see. So we are looking at some very big projects and the type of issues that are arising there. So we have both of the best of the both worlds, and yeah, Reddit is a very good suggestion too. Other comments, questions?
We have more time for some more questions. I have one question.
Sure.
So this is not my area. So this is like a general question that I have. You selected 20 keywords.
Yes.
per area. So how did you arrive at that number?
So that number, we basically looked at the experiments that we were running, that how many keywords probably would be more sufficient for us to look at. As I said, we went back and forth a lot between the number of keywords and the questions. And we also looked at the previous work. The previous work, the numbers that they choose is in the same range. So we tried to satisfy both. Look at what is the range for previous work and what is really working for us. And what is really doable in terms of manual work.
So you manually selected these keywords, or did you
These keywords, Mallet returns these keywords. But
Okay.
then we took these keywords, and for each of these topics, we looked at the keywords and we studied 15 questions and their answers to come up with the topics. So Mallet gives us something like this. But then we had to tell Mallet how many topics to generate. We had to do a lot of experiment on that. Because if you pick that number very small, then a lot of the topics are going to be combined. If you make it so big, then you have a lot of topics that are similar that need to be merged. So we did about 40 experiments there. And for tag selection, for significance and relevance, we used heuristics. Those heuristics have hyperparameters too. To configure them, we had to do 36 experiments with those parameters before we can choose the right value. So when you do this kind of studies, one big part of the job is coming up with the right values for these hyperparameters. Otherwise, the result is going to be not correct. So we had to do a lot of experiments. Yes?
You use model or tool to come up those?
Yes. So we used Mallet.
Open source?
Yes, it's available. What else? Other questions?
Since we're I'm just really curious as to how well the measures of say difficulty is really working, and it seems like if I would want to validate that, what would I do? And I can imagine like having experts, where you actually give them a whole bunch of pairs of questions and you have them rate that,
Yes.
and then you correspond to that. Is that
That-
on your to-do list or not?
That's one way of doing it, yes. But this is another way that we actually didn't invent that. So there are other works out there that do measure difficulty in finding answers. So this is difficulty about finding answers to your question. It's not about the intrinsic difficulty of the question you're asking. Because if I want to measure intrinsic difficulty, yes, I have to give this to some programmers and ask them how difficult is this question. But this difficulty is about how difficult is this for me to go type a question about basic concepts and find an answer fast.
I thought your difficulty is more intrinsic. If you're looking at how long it takes for people to come up with an answer to something, wasn't that a function of intrinsic difficulty?
It could be, but we don't have any data to back that up because it's difficult to even define intrinsic difficulty unless we do a study like that first and then do the correlation with this measurements that we have. So it's a subtle difference between intrinsic difficulty. We don't have the evidence to connect these two. That's why we say how difficult it is to find answers to the questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, Well, it seems like the implications you're really pushing on the difficulty of the question. Like, if you want to talk about, well, why is this relevant? You care about the intrinsic difficulty
Yes.
so much then.
Yeah. Questions? Comments? Alrighty, thank you.
One more
Yes,
question.
yes.
Can you apply this technique to maybe detect some, let's say, trolling, like other social media platforms like Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, you can apply this topic modeling, but what it gives you is basically topics. There are some other tools that find emerging topics for you. So you have different versions of the data, and then you do topic modeling, but they are online topic modeling, so you can feed data to it as a stream, and it tells you what are the topics that are emerging at each time. So you can do that too.
All right, then let's thank the speaker one more time.
Thank you.